I'm Alina Vance, 34, and I spent the last 5 years turning a rotting Victorian shell into a $3 million architectural masterpiece for the family I thought I was building. My hands still remember the feeling of sanding down the original banisters until my fingerprints were practically erased. I remember the smell of sawdust and varnish that clung to my hair for months. I poured my soul, my savings, and my sanity into this house. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. It was supposed to be the place where Mark and I grew old together. I pulled into the driveway at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was early. My client meeting in the city had ended abruptly, and I decided to skip the paperwork at the office. I wanted to surprise Mark. He had been complaining about stress at work, claiming he was taking half days to decompress at the gym. I had a bag of takeout from his favorite Thai place in the passenger seat. The spicy basil aroma filled the car. I thought I was being a good wife. I thought I was being thoughtful. I unlocked the front door. The heavy oak glided open silently. I had oiled the hinges myself just last week because the squeak was driving me crazy. I stepped into the foyer. The afternoon sun hit the chandelier, scattering rainbows across the walls I had hand-painted. It was quiet, too quiet. I took a step onto the marble floor. Click, my heels struck the stone. Click, click. The sound echoed up into the vaulted ceiling. I paused, listening for the TV or the hum of the treadmill in the garage. That's when I heard it. Laughter. It wasn't the canned laughter of a sitcom. It was wet, resonant, and real. It was coming from upstairs. My grip tightened on the takeout bag until the paper handle dug into my palm. I told myself it was the radio. Maybe Mark left a podcast playing. But then I heard the splash. It sounded like water sloshing over the side of a basin. I walked toward the grand staircase. My heart started a slow, heavy thudding in my ears. I climbed the stairs one by one. My hand trailed over the railing I had restored. The wood felt cold under my sweaty palm. The laughter came again. It was a duet this time, Mark's deep, rumbling chuckle, and a high, trilling giggle that definitely didn't belong to a podcast host. I reached the landing. The door to the master suite was wide open. I could see the unmade bed. I could see Mark's discarded suit jacket thrown carelessly onto the floor. I walked into the bedroom. The air felt heavy, humid. The door to the en-suite bathroom was cracked open. Steam curled out from the gap, drifting into the bedroom like a ghost. It hit my face, warm and cloying. I stopped breathing. I recognized the smell immediately. It wasn't soap, it was bergamot and sandalwood, my bath oil, the imported bottle that cost $80 an ounce. The bottle I bought for our anniversary and was saving for a special occasion. I crept closer. My legs felt like lead. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight it hurt. I reached out and pushed the bathroom door. It swung inward on silent hinges. The room was white with steam. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the haze. I looked at the oversized clawfoot tub. It was the centerpiece of the room. I had spent weeks sourcing that tub from a salvage yard in Charleston. I had re-enameled it myself. And there they were. Mark was leaning back against the porcelain rim. His eyes were closed. His wet hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked relaxed, peaceful. And straddling his lap facing him was Sarah, my neighbor, Sarah who lived in the Colonial across the street. Sarah who borrowed a cup of sugar last week. Sarah who waved at me this morning while she was watering her hydrangeas. She was naked. Her skin was flushed pink from the heat. Her wet hair clung to her back. She was tracing a finger down Mark's chest, swirling through the suds. I felt the blood drain from my face. My vision blurred at the edges. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I almost dropped the Thai food. Mark murmured something. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone. It was intimate, soft. A tone he hadn't used with me in months. Sarah laughed again. She leaned forward and whispered something in his ear. He smiled. It was a genuine smile, a smile I thought he had lost. They were in my house, in my tub, using my expensive oils. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to break free. I felt a scream building in my throat, hot and jagged. I wanted to rush in there. I wanted to drag her out by her hair. I wanted to smash the expensive tile I had laid with my own hands, but I didn't move. My eyes locked onto the door handle. It was a vintage brass lever, and right below it, sitting in the keyhole on the outside of the door, was the heavy iron skeleton key. It was an aesthetic choice. I insisted on vintage hardware for the entire house. Mark had argued it was impractical. He said we'd never use it. I stared at that key. The steam swirled around them. They were in their own little world. They felt safe. They felt untouchable. They thought I was in the city, buried under blueprints and contracts. My shock began to curdle. It turned from ice to fire. The nausea faded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I wasn't going to be the hysterical wife. I was the architect of this house. I controlled the environment. I took a slow, deliberate step back. I set the bag of Thai food on the vanity chair. I didn't make a sound. The water splashed loudly as Sarah shifted her weight, covering the sound of my breathing. I reached for the door handle. My hand was shaking, but my resolve was iron. I pulled the door shut. I didn't slam it. I closed it with the precision of a surgeon. The latch clicked. Inside, the splashing stopped. "Did you hear that?" Sarah's voice was muffled now. I grabbed the iron key. I turned it to the right. Clunk, the deadbolt slid home. I took a step back. I stared at the wood grain. I listened. "Mark," Sarah's voice pitched up. "The door just closed." "It's probably a draft," Mark said. "Relax." I stood there in the bedroom, my chest heaving. I looked at the key in my hand. It was cold and heavy. I put it in my pocket. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the jailer. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I didn't do any of the things a heartbroken woman is supposed to do in the movies. Instead, I felt a strange, cold precision take over my body, like my veins had been drained of blood and filled with ice water. My fingers tightened around the bow of the heavy skeleton key. The metal was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the humid heat radiating from the bathroom. I twisted my wrist. The motion was smooth, practiced. I had installed this lock myself. I knew exactly how much pressure it needed. Clack. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was louder than a gunshot in the silent bedroom. It was a definitive mechanical finality. It was the sound of a coffin lid closing. I pulled my hand back as if the brass had burned me. I stood frozen, my eyes fixed on the keyhole, waiting for the reaction. For 3 seconds, there was nothing but the sound of water lapping against the sides of the tub. Then the splashing became frantic. "What the hell?" Mark's voice muffled through the solid oak door. He didn't sound scared. He didn't sound guilty. He sounded annoyed. He sounded like a man whose relaxation had been inconveniently interrupted by a gust of wind or a faulty latch. I heard the wet slap of feet hitting the tiled floor. I imagined him grabbing a towel, dripping water onto the vintage hexagonal tiles I had spent 4 weekends grouting. The doorknob rattled. It turned sharply to the left, then the right. It stopped hard against the mechanism. "The door's stuck," Mark grumbled. I could hear him clearly. I had insulated these walls for sound, but the gap beneath the door let his voice slide out like a serpent. "Is it locked?" Sarah's voice was higher, laced with a sudden, sharp panic. "Mark, why is it locked?" "It's not locked, it's just this old house," Mark snapped, the arrogance dripping from his tone. He rattled the handle again, violently this time. The wood shuddered in the frame, but it held. I had chosen solid core oak. It was 2 inches thick. It wasn't going anywhere. "Hello," Mark shouted. He pounded on the wood with the side of his fist. Thud, thud, thud. Is anyone out there? I stood less than 2 feet away. I could feel the vibrations of his pounding through the soles of my shoes. I stared at the intricate grain of the wood, watching a swirl of dark varnish right at eye level. I didn't answer. My silence was the only weapon I had in that moment, and I wielded it with terrifying calm. If I spoke, I would scream. If I screamed, I would cry. And if I cried, he would win. He would spin it. He would manipulate me. He would tell me I was crazy, that it wasn't what it looked like, that I was overreacting. But he couldn't gaslight a locked door. Mark, I heard footsteps, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I heard heels, someone walked in. Don't be paranoid, Mark hissed back, though I heard the doubt creeping into his voice. It's probably the cleaning lady. Maria, hey, the door jammed? I felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my chest, but I swallowed it down. He thought I was the cleaning lady. He thought so little of me, of my schedule, of my intelligence, that his first assumption wasn't that his wife had come home early, but that the help had accidentally trapped him. I looked down at the key in my hand. It was an antique piece of iron, heavy and rusted in spots. I slowly curled my fingers over it, making a fist. The edges dug into my palm, painful and grounding. Maria, he shouted again, louder. Open the damn door. I took a deep breath. The smell of the Thai food was making me sick now. The scent of basil and coconut milk mixed with the betrayal in the air, creating a nauseating cocktail. I reached out and touched the door frame. I ran my fingertips over the wood I had sanded. I had built this room for us. I had built this life for us, and now I was dismantling it, one turned lock at a time. Mark, Sarah said, and this time her voice was crystal clear. The key isn't in the hole. Silence. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere on the other side of the door. The arrogance evaporated. The annoyance vanished. It was replaced by a sudden, suffocating realization. Alina. His voice was barely a whisper. He said my name like a question he didn't want the answer to. I closed my eyes. Hearing him say my name made my knees weak. It physically hurt, like a punch to the gut. A tear leaked out and tracked a hot line down my cheek. I angrily wiped it away with the back of my hand. Alina, are you out there? He sounded closer now, pressed right up against the crack. Babe, is that you? I looked at the Thai food bag sitting on the vanity chair. Pad Thai, no peanuts, extra lime, just the way he liked it. I picked up the bag. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet room. I knew he heard it. Alina, open the door, he said, his voice dropping to that low, commanding register he used when he wanted to get his way. Stop playing around. This isn't funny. Open the door right now. I walked toward the hallway. My heels clicked on the floorboards. Click, click, click. I made sure each step was deliberate. I wanted him to hear me walking away. Alina. He slammed his body against the door. Alina, don't you walk away. You open this goddamn door. Sarah started crying. It was a pathetic, mewling sound. I reached the threshold of the bedroom and stopped. I looked back one last time at the closed door. I wasn't just locking them in a bathroom. I was locking away 5 years of marriage. I was locking away the future children we had planned. I was locking away the naive woman who thought love was enough. I dropped the heavy brass key into the pocket of my blazer. It pulled the fabric down with its weight. Alina, Mark screamed, his voice cracking with genuine fear now. I turned my back on the master suite. I walked out into the hallway, leaving the screams behind me, and started down the grand staircase. I had a house to run. And I had a plan to form. I'm Alina, 32, and up until 10 minutes ago, I was a successful architect with a perfect marriage. Now I'm the warden of a high-end prison holding my husband and his mistress. I didn't make it past the first step of the staircase. The pounding started almost immediately. a violent, rhythmic thudding that shook the artwork hanging in the hallway. It wasn't the polite knock of a confused man anymore. It was the desperate hammering of a trapped animal. Elena. Mark's voice ripped through the solid oak, cracking with a raw panic I had never heard before. Elena, I know you're there. Open this door. I stopped. My hand hovered over the banister. The wood was cool and smooth under my palm, grounded and real, unlike the life I had been living for the past 5 years. I turned around. I shouldn't have gone back. A smarter woman would have left the house, called a lawyer, and let them rot in the humidity until the locksmith arrived. But I wasn't feeling smart. I was feeling dangerous. I walked back toward the bedroom suite. My heels sank into the plush runner rug, silencing my approach, but the sheer force of Mark's fists against the door masked any sound I could have made. Thud, thud, thud. Oh God, Sarah was sobbing now. I could hear her clearly between the strikes. It was a wet, hyperventilating sound. Mark, she knows, she knows. Shut up, Sarah, Mark roared, his voice turning from confusion to a panicked roar. Elena, baby, please. It's not what it looks like. Just open the door and let me explain. I stepped into the bedroom. The air was still thick with the smell of the Thai food I had left on the chair. It mingled with the heavy, humid scent of the bath salts I had bought for our anniversary, lavender and eucalyptus. I walked right up to the door. I could feel the vibrations of his blows radiating through the floorboards and up through the soles of my shoes. He was throwing his entire weight against it. But I knew my work. I had specified the hinges myself, heavy-duty, ball-bearing steel. That door wasn't yielding to anything less than a battering ram. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I closed my eyes. For a second we were intimate again, separated by only 2 inches of timber. I could hear his ragged breathing on the other side. I could hear the water sloshing as he paced the small confines of the bathroom. Elena, he gasped, sensing my presence even through the barrier. The pounding stopped abruptly. Are you there? I pressed my palms flat against the door, feeling the grain of the wood. My wedding ring clicked against the varnish. I'm here, Mark, I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't the shrill shriek of a scorned wife. It was low. It was calm. It was the voice I used when a contractor tried to cut corners on a foundation. It was the voice of absolute authority. Oh, thank God, Mark let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Babe, listen, you have to listen. It's a misunderstanding. She came over to use the shower because her water is out. I was just helping her with the faucet. It's crazy, I know, but please open the door. It's hot in here. I listened to the lie. It was so clumsy. It was so insulting. He was naked in a bathtub with our neighbor, and he thought I was stupid enough to believe he was plumbing. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, dark and jagged. Her water is out, I repeated, my voice dripping with mock contemplation. That's funny, Mark. Because I saw her sprinklers running when I pulled into the driveway. Silence. The silence was heavier than the pounding had been. It suffocated the room. Elena, don't do this. His voice dropped an octave, turning dark. This is false imprisonment. You can't lock us in here. It's illegal. So is breaching our prenup, I whispered, though I knew he heard every syllable. Please, Sarah whimpered in the background. Mrs. Vance, please, I just want to go home. I need to leave. Hearing her voice, hearing her address me by my married name while she stood naked next to my husband, sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins so sharp it made my vision blur. My pulse was a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of pure adrenaline hammering against my temples. I smelled it then. Through the crack in the door beneath the lavender was the faint, unmistakable scent of betrayal. It smelled like sweat, cheap vanilla body spray, and the musk of 2 people who thought they had gotten away with murder. I leaned closer to the crack between the door and the jamb. You like that bathroom, don't you, Mark? I asked softly. I remember you telling me the tub was too deep. You said the hexagonal tiles were too retro. You said the brass hardware was a waste of money. Elena, stop it, he warned, thumping the door once with his palm. Open the damn door. But now look at you, I continued, tracing the line of the door frame with my fingernail. You're getting so much use out of it. You and Sarah seem very comfortable. I'm going to kick this door down, Mark shouted, the panic rising again. I swear to God, Elena, if you don't unlock this right now, I will break it down. Go ahead, I challenged him. It's solid oak, Mark, reinforced frame. You'll break your foot before you break that wood. And even if you do manage to get out, where are you going to go? You're naked, you're trapped. I heard a splash, then a thud, like he had slipped on the wet tile trying to gain leverage. Elena, he screamed, a raw, guttural sound. Since you love that bathroom so much, I told him through the wood, letting my words sink in like nails, you can stay there while I rearrange our lives. I pushed myself off the door. I felt light. I felt terrifyingly clear-headed. I didn't wait for his response. I turned on my heel. Elena, no, don't you walk away. I walked back to the vanity chair. I picked up my purse. I checked my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark, but I didn't look broken. I looked focused. I reached into my pocket and touched the heavy iron key. It was my insurance policy. It was my gavel. Elena, the pounding resumed, frantic and chaotic. Sarah was wailing now, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. I walked out of the bedroom, crossing the threshold into the hallway. I didn't look back. I descended the grand staircase, one step at a time, the sound of my husband's fists fading slightly with the distance but never fully disappearing. I reached the bottom floor. The house was beautiful. It was a masterpiece of design and light, and it was infested. I walked into the kitchen and placed my phone on the marble island. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what I was about to do. I wasn't just leaving them in a bathroom. I was about to burn their entire world down, and I had the matches right in my hand. I unlocked my phone. I didn't call a lawyer, not yet. I opened the app for the smart home system. I looked at the controls for the master bathroom. Thermostat 72 degrees. Heated floors off. Smart lighting 50%. I stared at the screen. A cold smile touched my lips. I cranked the floor heat to the maximum setting, 95 degrees. I swiped the thermostat up. If they wanted to sweat, I would help them. I stood in the center of the kitchen, the blue light of the smart home app glowing against my skin. I could picture the temperature rising in the master bathroom upstairs. I could imagine the steam building, turning the air heavy and thick, mimicking the pressure expanding inside my chest. I tapped the screen one last time to confirm the setting, 95 degrees. I slipped the phone into my pocket. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking with a terrifying surplus of energy. I felt electric. I felt lethal. I turned away from the kitchen island. The muffled thuds from the second floor were still audible, a dull, rhythmic reminder of the chaos I had contained, but I tuned them out. I had a different demolition to oversee. I walked down the hallway toward the east wing of the house. This was Mark's territory, his sanctuary. I pushed open the heavy double doors of his home office. The room smelled like him. A mixture of aged leather, expensive scotch, and the cedarwood polish the cleaners used on Fridays. It was a smell that used to make me feel safe, grounded. Now it made my stomach turn over. I crossed the Persian rug, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood border. I rounded the massive mahogany desk. It was an antique he had insisted on importing from Italy, a purchase that had cost more than my first car. There it was. His laptop was sitting open on the leather blotter. The screen was dark, asleep, but the power light pulsed a soft, steady white. I pulled his high-backed leather chair out and sat down. The leather creaked, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room. I felt like an intruder in my own home, a spy in enemy territory. I tapped the space bar. The screen flared to life, my breath hitched in my throat. I expected a password prompt. I expected a fingerprint scan. I expected some level of security from a man who managed hedge funds for a living. But the screen opened directly to his desktop. He hadn't locked it. He had been so eager to get Sarah into that bathtub, so confident in his privacy, that he had left the digital keys to his life sitting right here on the mahogany. The arrogance of it made my teeth ache. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was oblivious. I navigated straight to the browser. He had multiple tabs open. ESPN, The Wall Street Journal, and the bank. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I clicked the tab. It was our joint savings account. The session had timed out, asking for a password to log back in. I stared at the blinking cursor. I knew his passwords. He was a creature of habit, a man who thought complexity was for other people. I typed in the variation he used for everything, Mark Vance 88. Access granted. The numbers filled the screen. I stared at the balance. It was the accumulation of 5 years of bonuses, savings, and the sale of my grandmother's property. It was our future family fund. It was the money for the nursery. It was the money for the college tuitions of children we hadn't conceived yet. I didn't hesitate. I opened a new tab and logged into my personal high-yield savings account, the one I had kept from before we were married. The one he knew about but couldn't access. I arranged the windows side by side. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, hot and acidic, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't afford to be sick. I had to be surgical. I initiated a transfer. I typed the numbers into the box. I didn't leave a penny. I entered the full amount down to the cents. Transfer amount $248,560.42. My finger hovered over the mouse. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. I heard a muffled shout. He was probably trying to break the handle now. He didn't know the handle wasn't the problem. The deadbolt was. I clicked submit. A loading wheel spun in the center of the screen. I held my breath. My lungs burned. The seconds stretched out, agonizing and slow. I watched the gray circle spin round and round, deciding my fate. Transaction successful. I let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. The balance on the left screen dropped to $0. The balance on the right screen swelled. I had just severed the financial artery of our marriage. I wasn't done. I clicked on his email icon in the bookmark bar. It opened instantly. I typed 5 letters into the search bar. SARAH. The results populated the screen faster than I could process them. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. There were dozens of them. Hundreds. Subject, Tuesday night. Subject, she's going to a conference. Subject, miss you. Subject, the bathroom is ready. I clicked on the oldest one. It was dated 8 months ago. 8 months. I read the first line. I can't stop thinking about the way you looked at the block party. Elena doesn't suspect a thing. She's too wrapped up in the new project. A sob ripped its way out of my throat before I could stop it. It was a raw, ugly sound. He hadn't just slipped. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a campaign. This was a separate life he had been building right under my nose, using my trust as the foundation. I read another one. She's boring, Sarah, you're the fire. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. I wiped them away angrily with the back of my hand. I refused to cry over a man who called me boring while spending my money. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest, displacing the pain. It was a solid, heavy weight. It anchored me. I went to the account settings. I found the security tab. I started changing everything. I changed the password to his primary email. I changed the recovery phone number to my own. I went to the Smart Home Master account. I changed the password there too. I locked him out of the thermostat. I locked him out of the lights. I locked him out of the security cameras. I went back to the bank website. I changed the login credentials for the joint checking account, the one his paycheck was deposited into. My fingers flew across the keyboard. It was a rhythm I knew well. I was drafting a new blueprint. I was redlining his access to the world. New password, payback is a bitch one. I clicked save. I sat back in the leather chair. My heart was still racing, but my mind was crystal clear. I looked at the laptop screen one last time. I had stripped him of his assets. I had stripped him of his privacy. I had stripped him of his control. I closed the laptop with a definitive snap. I stood up. My legs felt steady now. I walked out of the office, leaving the scent of leather and betrayal behind me. I walked back toward the staircase. The house was quiet again. The pounding had stopped. I looked up toward the second floor. I wondered how hot it was in there now. I wondered if the sweat was stinging his eyes yet. I pulled my phone out again. I had the money. I had the control. Now I needed the law. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Jessica Pearson, divorce attorney. I pressed call. As the line began to ring, I started up the stairs. I wasn't going to hide in the kitchen while they suffered. I wanted to be right outside that door when reality finally set in. I'm Alina, 32, and today I decided that being a good wife was a title I was willing to burn to the ground along with my husband's reputation. I reached the top of the landing, the phone still pressed to my ear. The line connected with a sharp click. Jessica Pearson's office, a receptionist chirped. "It's Alina Vance," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. It was too calm, too steady. "Tell Jessica to clear her schedule for tomorrow morning. I'm filing for divorce, and tell her I want to go for the throat." I hung up before she could ask a single question. I didn't need legal advice right this second. I needed to finish what I had started. I stood in the hallway, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums. The muffled sounds from the bathroom had changed. The aggressive banging had stopped, replaced by a low, confused murmuring. The heat was rising. I could almost feel it radiating through the door, a physical manifestation of the hell I was creating. But my eyes weren't on the door, they were on the floor. Sarah's clothes were still there. They lay in a heap on the runner rug, a pathetic pile of floral fabric and cheap denim. Her bra was draped over one of her sandals. It looked trashy. It looked desperate. I looked at that pile, and a new wave of inspiration hit me. Mark was going to lose his money. That was handled. But Sarah didn't have a fortune to lose. Sarah had something she valued far more than a bank balance. She had her reputation. She was the queen bee of our cul-de-sac. She was the woman who organized the block parties. She was the one who posted gluten-free muffin recipes at 6:00 a.m. and judged anyone who bought store-bought cookies. She thrived on the illusion of perfection. I looked at the phone in my hand. I wasn't just holding a device, I was holding a grenade. I unlocked the screen and navigated to my messaging apps. I scrolled past my family chat. I scrolled past my work threads. I found it, the Oak Hollow Ladies. It was the neighborhood group chat, 42 women. It was the digital town square where Sarah held court. Just this morning, she had sent a reminder about the bake sale planning committee meeting tonight at her house. "Ladies, please be prompt. 7 p.m. sharp. I'll have appetizers." I stared at her profile picture. It was a selfie of her and her husband smiling on a beach, looking like the picture of marital bliss. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, dark and jagged. I opened the camera app. I took a step back to get the framing right. I wanted the composition to be undeniable. I centered the pile of discarded clothes in the foreground. I made sure the lacy strap of her bra was clearly visible. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was the locked door of my master bathroom. Click. The shutter sound echoed in the hallway. I looked at the photo. It was perfect. It was raw. It was the ugliest thing I had ever captured, and it was beautiful. I went back to the group chat. I tapped the plus sign. I selected the photo. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I needed the caption to be precise. I didn't want to sound like a raving lunatic. I wanted to sound like the helpful neighbor Sarah pretended to be. I typed slowly, savoring every keystroke. Hi everyone, so sorry to do this last minute, but the planning meeting at Sarah's house is canceled tonight. I paused, I took a breath. She's currently locked in my master bathroom with my husband, and she left her clothes in my hallway. I don't think she'll be able to host until she figures out how to get out. You might want to reschedule. I read it twice. It was factual. It was polite. It was nuclear. I felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made my vision swim. This was the point of no return. Once I pressed that blue arrow, there was no taking it back. I would be the woman who aired her dirty laundry literally to the entire neighborhood. I didn't care. I pressed send. The message bubble swooshed onto the screen, sitting there in innocent blue against the white background. The photo loaded right underneath it. I stood there, frozen, staring at the screen. Delivered. I waited. The timestamps started to change. Read by Karen at 4:14 p.m. Read by Linda at 4:14 p.m. Read by Susan at 4:14 p.m. The numbers ticked up. 5 people, 10 people, 20. I watched the little avatars bob along the bottom of the message as the entire neighborhood opened their phones. I could visualize them in their kitchens, in their driveways, stopping mid-step. I could imagine the gasps. I could imagine the frantic screenshots being taken. Usually when someone posted in this group, 3 or 4 people would reply instantly with emojis or comments. Sounds great. On my way. Now silence. Absolute deafening digital silence. No one was typing. No one used a reaction emoji. The shock was so total, so complete, that 42 women were rendered speechless simultaneously. The typing indicator bubble appeared for a split second, probably Linda, the neighborhood gossip, and then immediately vanished. Even she didn't know how to touch this. I watched the read by count hit 40. Everyone knew. Sarah's carefully curated image of the perfect wife and mother had just been obliterated in a single JPEG. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking again, but the nausea was gone. In its place was a cold, hard satisfaction. From behind the bathroom door, I heard a sound. It was a heavy thud, followed by a sharp, muffled curse. It's getting hot in here. Mark's voice was muffled, panicked. Elena, open the damn door, the thermostat is broken. He didn't know. He had no idea that while he was sweating through his shirt, his entire social circle was staring at his mistress's underwear on their iPhones. I looked at the group chat one last time, still silence. I slipped the phone into my pocket. The heat was set. The money was gone. The reputation was destroyed. I walked closer to the door. I placed my palm flat against the wood. It was warm to the touch. I can't open it, Mark, I said, my voice loud enough for them to hear but calm. I'm afraid I'm busy. Busy doing what? He screamed, and I could hear the desperation in his voice, the sweat dripping off his words. Watching you burn, I whispered to myself. Then louder, I'm going to pack a bag, enjoy the sauna. I turned on my heel and walked toward the guest room. I had one more thing to do before I left this house forever. I needed to make sure that when they finally broke that door down, there was absolutely nothing left for them to salvage. I'm Alina, 32, and I'm currently conducting a fire sale of my cheating husband's life, starting with his most prized possession. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards cool against my bare feet. I grabbed the heavy ring of keys from the hook by the mudroom door. They jingled in the silence, a cheerful sound that contrasted sharply with the destruction I was orchestrating. I stepped into the garage and flipped the switch. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating the beast sleeping in the center of the bay. It was a vintage 1986 Porsche 911 Turbo, guards red. It was Mark's baby. He spent more time polishing its fenders than he did talking to me. He treated this car with a reverence he had never shown our marriage. I ran my hand along the cold metal of the hood. It was spotless, perfect. I pulled out my phone again. I didn't search for a reputable dealer. I didn't look for someone who would give me a fair market price. I looked for speed. I searched for one of those we buy exotics cash places that advertised on late-night billboards. The kind of guys who didn't ask questions if the title was signed and the price was too good to be true. I dialed the number. Exotic Auto, a gruff voice answered. I have a pristine 86 Porsche 911 Turbo, I said, my voice flat. It has 30,000 original miles. It's in my garage. I want it gone in 45 minutes. There was a pause on the other end. Lady, I can't just, I'll sell it to you for 50,000 cash, I cut him off. The silence on the other end was deafening. The car was worth triple that easily, maybe more. I'm at 42 Oak Hollow Lane, I said. If you aren't here in 20 minutes with a duffel bag of bills, I'm calling the next number on Google. I'm on my way, he said. The line went dead. I leaned against the car and waited. I could hear faint thumping from upstairs. The master bathroom window faced the front of the house, directly over the driveway. He was probably trying to figure out a way to break the glass without slicing himself to ribbons. 20 minutes later, a flatbed truck roared up the driveway. A black SUV followed close behind. A man in a leather jacket hopped out of the SUV. He looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. He walked into my garage, his eyes widening as they landed on the Porsche. He walked a circle around it, running a hand over the spoiler. He looked for scratches. He looked for dents. He found nothing. The title? He asked, looking at me with suspicion. I slapped the folder onto the hood of the car. Right here, both our names are on it. I have power of attorney for asset liquidation. That was a lie, technically. I had power of attorney for medical emergencies buried somewhere in our filing cabinet, but this guy wasn't going to check the fine print. He was looking at a six-figure payday for pennies. He unzipped a canvas bag and showed me the stacks. Load it up, I said. He signaled to the driver of the flatbed. The sound of the garage door opening must have alerted Mark, or maybe it was the rumble of the flatbed's diesel engine. As the driver began to hook the winch to the Porsche's bumper, I heard a sound from above. Hey, hey! I walked out onto the driveway. I shielded my eyes against the late afternoon sun and looked up. The small ventilation window of the master bath was cranked open as far as it would go. Mark's face was pressed against the glass, red and sweaty. He looked like a trapped animal. Elena, he screamed, his voice cracking. Who is that? What is that truck doing? I didn't answer him. I turned back to the buyer. Pen, I demanded. He handed me a ballpoint. I didn't use a clipboard. I didn't go to the workbench. I slapped the title document directly onto the hood of the Porsche. I pressed down hard, feeling the tip of the pen dig into the paper, knowing it was likely leaving a ghost of an indentation in the perfect wax job underneath. I signed my name with a flourish. Stop! Mark shrieked from the window. He was banging on the glass now. Elena, that's my car. Don't you touch it, get away from it. The buyer looked up, hesitant for the first time. Lady, that's my soon-to-be ex-husband, I said calmly, handing him the title and taking the bag of cash. He's upset about the divorce. Take the car before I change my mind. Greed won out over caution. The buyer jumped into the driver's seat of the Porsche to steer it while the winch pulled it up. The engine roared to life. That distinct, throat-clearing growl of the air-cooled engine echoed off the suburban houses. It was a sound Mark worshipped, and now it was the sound of his heart breaking. "No, no, Sarah, do something," Mark screamed, turning away from the window, presumably to yell at his naked accomplice. I stood in the driveway, the heavy bag of cash weighing down my shoulder. I watched as the red Porsche was hoisted onto the flatbed. I watched as they strapped down the wheels. Mark was sobbing now. I could hear it. Loud, heaving sobs drifting down from the second floor. He wasn't crying because he lost me. He wasn't crying because he ruined our marriage. He was crying because he was losing his toy. The truck driver gave me a thumbs up. I waved. The truck rumbled down the driveway, carrying the last symbol of Mark's ego away with it. I turned back to the house. I looked up at the window one last time. Mark was still there, his forehead resting against the glass, defeated. I patted the bag of cash. 1 hour, I whispered to myself. It only took 1 hour to strip you bare. I walked back inside. I had the money, I had the satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. I headed for the kitchen. I needed a glass of wine, and I needed to figure out exactly what to do with $50,000 of dirty money before the cops arrived. I'm Alina, 32, and I am currently eating a bowl of Fruit Loops while my cheating husband realizes he is a prisoner in the very home he destroyed. The adrenaline from selling the Porsche was beginning to fade, leaving a hollow, gnawing hunger in the pit of my stomach. My hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer caloric deficit of rage. I left the heavy duffel bag of cash on the kitchen counter, $50,000 sitting there like a bag of groceries, and opened the pantry. I didn't want wine anymore. I wanted sugar. I wanted the comfort of childhood mornings before I knew what mortgages, betrayal, or divorce lawyers were. I poured a mountain of colorful loops into a ceramic bowl and drowned them in milk. From upstairs, the thumping sound changed. It wasn't the rhythmic banging on the door anymore. It was a scrapping, metallic sound coming from the bathroom. I took the bowl and walked to the bottom of the stairs. "You have to push it," Sarah's voice shrieked, muffled but distinct. "Mark, get me out of here. I can't breathe in here." "I'm trying," Mark yelled back. "The crank is stuck." I took a step up. The carpet felt plush under my bare feet. I took a bite of cereal. The crunch was loud in the quiet hallway, but they couldn't hear me over their own panic. I knew exactly what Mark was doing. He had given up on the door. He knew I had the key, and he knew I wasn't opening it. So he was going for the window. I walked up the stairs slowly, step by step, listening to the frantic scuffling. The master bath had a small, architectural window. It was high up, designed for ventilation rather than a view. It was big enough for a man to squeeze through if he was desperate enough. And Mark was definitely desperate. I reached the landing and sat down on the top step, cross-legged, balancing the bowl on my knee. I was only 5 feet from the bathroom door. I could feel the heat radiating off the wood. I had cranked the thermostat to 90 degrees before locking them in, and the small space, filled with the steam from their interrupted bath and the body heat of 2 panicked adulterers, must have been stifling by now. "I got it," Mark grunted. I heard the distinct sound of the window mechanism groaning, followed by the pop of the screen being punched out. Fresh air would be rushing in now. Relief, hope. "Go," Sarah screamed. "Climb out and come around to unlock the door." I took another spoonful of cereal, savoring the artificial fruit flavor. I waited for the realization. I heard Mark scrambling up onto the vanity. I heard his grunt of exertion as he tried to pull himself through the opening. Then silence, then a metallic clang. What is that? Mark's voice was breathless, confused. What the hell is that? What's wrong? Sarah cried. There's bars, Mark stammered. There are iron bars across the window. I smiled, milk dripping from the corner of my lip. He had forgotten. It was 6 months ago after a string of break-ins 2 streets over. I had been terrified. I told Mark we needed security bars on the ground floor windows. He had waved me off, saying it was too expensive, that we lived in a safe neighborhood. So I handled it myself. I hired a contractor to install decorative wrought iron security grills. And because I was paranoid about someone climbing up the trellis, I had them install one on the bathroom window too. Mark had barely noticed. He called them ugly once and never looked at them again, but he was looking at them now. Push them, Sarah yelled. Kick them out. I can't, Mark shouted, the sound of his fist hitting solid iron echoing down the hall. They're bolted into the brick, Elena, Elena. He was back at the door now, pounding with renewed fury. I know you're out there, he screamed. I can hear you eating. Open this goddamn door. It's Fruit Loops, Mark, I said calmly, loud enough for him to hear. They're delicious. Do you want some? Oh wait, I forgot. You're on a diet. Or is that just what you told me when you started skipping dinner to meet her? Let us out, Sarah wailed. She sounded broken. The confident, smug woman who had sneered at me at neighborhood block parties was gone. In her place was a sweaty, terrified creature trapped in a tiled box. I can't believe you, Sarah hissed, her voice turning from me to him. You said she was stupid. You said she was oblivious. Shut up, Sarah, Mark snapped. Don't tell me to shut up, she screamed. The sound of a slap, wet and sharp, echoed through the door. My eyes widened. I chewed slowly. The play was entering the second act. You got us into this, Sarah yelled. You and your stupid car, you let her sell your car. She sold it for 50 grand, Sarah. Do you know what that car is worth? Do you know how long I waited for that car? I don't care about your car, Sarah shrieked. My husband is going to see those photos. Everyone is going to see them. My life is over because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. My mouth, Mark laughed, a manic, hysterical sound. You're the one who wanted to take a bath in the middle of the day. It'll be romantic, you said. She won't be home for hours, you said. I swirled the milk in my bowl. It was turning a pleasant shade of pink. I felt completely detached from the reality of the situation. It was as if I was watching a reality TV show, but with better sound quality. The man I had loved for 7 years, the man I had washed socks for, the man I had nursed through the flu, he was gone. In his place was a rat, clawing at the walls of a trap I had built, turning on the other rat he was trapped with. It's hot, Sarah moaned. Mark, I'm going to pass out. It's so hot. Drink some tap water, Mark spat. And put some clothes on, for God's sake, you look pathetic. I look pathetic, Sarah's voice rose to a screech. You're crying over a Porsche while your wife destroys our lives. I set the empty bowl down on the carpet. I stood up and leaned my forehead against the door frame. I could feel the vibrations of their movement inside. Mark, I said softly. The arguing stopped instantly. Elena. His voice was small, hopeful. Elena, baby, please. Enough is enough. You've made your point. Sarah is sick. We're dying in here. Just unlock the door and we can talk. We can fix this. Fix it? I whispered. Like you fixed the sink, like you fixed our marriage? I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. Just open the door. I have a question, Mark, I said. Anything, he begged. Anything. When the police get here, I said, checking my watch, do you want them to find you holding a towel, or do you want to be completely naked when they break that door down? Police, Sarah gasped. You called the police. I didn't call them, I lied. But the neighbors probably did. You two have been screaming for 20 minutes. And honestly, with the way you're banging on the walls, they probably think someone is being murdered. It wasn't a total lie. Linda next door had almost certainly called the cops the moment she saw the tow truck and heard the screaming. Elena, don't let them see us like this, Mark pleaded. Please. You chose this, Mark, I said, stepping back from the door. You chose the cage, I just locked it. I picked up my bowl and walked back down the stairs. The screaming started again, louder this time, fueled by a new, urgent terror. I walked into the kitchen and picked up the bag of cash. It was heavy, comforting. I had the money. I had the car gone. I had his reputation in ashes. But as I looked around the kitchen, the granite countertops we picked out together, the photos on the fridge I hadn't taken down yet, I realized I wasn't done. The house, this beautiful, lie-filled house. It was in both our names, but the insurance policy, that was just in mine. I shook the thought away. No, that was too far, even for me. Instead, I looked at the laptop sitting on the island. It was Mark's work computer. He had left it open. I walked over to it. The screen was dark, but I tapped the spacebar and it flickered to life. Password protected. I typed in Porsche 911. Access granted. I smiled. He really was a simple creature. I opened his email client. I wasn't looking for love letters. I was looking for the one thing Mark loved almost as much as his car, his job as a senior financial analyst. I found the folder marked Confidential Merger. I pulled the phone from my pocket. I took a photo of the screen. Then I heard sirens in the distance. I zipped up the bag of cash. It was time to go. But first I hit Select All on his inbox. My finger hovered over the delete button. Goodbye, Mark, I whispered. I clicked. I'm Alina, 29 years old, and I just destroyed my cheating husband's life with a single click while he was trapped in our master bathroom with the neighbor's wife. The screen of Mark's laptop went black as it went to sleep, hiding the evidence of the digital massacre I had just committed. I felt a strange, cold vibration in my chest, like a hummingbird trapped in a ribcage of ice. Upstairs, the screaming had devolved into a low, rhythmic thudding against the heavy oak door. They were tired. They were hot. But I wasn't done with them yet. I looked at the heavy brass key sitting on the marble island next to the bowl of pink milk. It was an antique skeleton key, part of the vintage hardware I had insisted on when we renovated. Mark had hated it because it was fiddly. Now it was the only thing keeping him from facing the consequences of his actions, and ironically, the only thing keeping him safe from what was coming next. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over 911, but I swiped past it. The police were a blunt instrument, impersonal and bureaucratic. Mark and Sarah deserved something more intimate. I scrolled down to neighbors and tapped Dave. Dave was Sarah's husband. He was a high school history teacher, a man who wore sweater vests unironically and brought our trash bins up from the curb when we were on vacation. He was a good man. He didn't deserve this, but he deserved the truth. The phone rang once, twice. Alina, Dave's voice was cheerful, confused. Everything okay? I saw a tow truck pull away from your place a while ago. Dave, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. You need to come over. What now? Right now, I said. The front door is unlocked. Just walk in. Is Sarah there? He asked, a sudden note of worry spiking in his tone. She's not answering her texts. She said she was going to the gym. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling a pang of genuine pity for him. Just come over, Dave, I whispered. I hung up before he could ask any more questions. I grabbed the duffel bag filled with $50,000 in cash. It felt heavy on my shoulder, a tangible weight of freedom. I walked into the foyer and stood at the bottom of the grand staircase. The thudding upstairs had stopped. They must have heard me talking. Alina, Mark's voice drifted down, hoarse and desperate. Who was that? Did you call the cops? Elena, please, I can't have an arrest on my record. I didn't answer. I just stood there, smoothing down the front of my dress, waiting for the final player to enter the stage. I looked at the wedding photos arranged on the wall of the staircase. Mark and I in Hawaii. Mark and I at Christmas. They looked like artifacts from a lost civilization, relics of a life that had been incinerated in the last 45 minutes. The front door creaked open. Sunlight spilled into the hallway, blindingly bright compared to the dim, tension-filled atmosphere of the house. Dave stepped inside. He looked frantic, his eyes darting around the empty living room before landing on me. He was wearing a faded World's Best Dad t-shirt and holding a gardening trowel he must have forgotten to put down. Elena, he breathed, stepping closer. What's going on? Where is she? I looked at him, really looked at him. He was the collateral damage in Mark and Sarah's selfish game. I have something of yours, I said softly. Dave frowned, his brow furrowing. What? I held up the brass key. It caught the light, gleaming like a jagged gold tooth. This is the key to my master bathroom, I said. Dave stared at the key, then at me, total incomprehension written on his face. Why do you have the key? He asked. Because I locked the door, I replied. Why would you lock the door? To keep the rats inside, I said. Upstairs, Sarah heard his voice. Dave, she shrieked. The sound was animalistic, terrified. Dave flinched as if he'd been slapped. He looked up the stairs, his eyes widening until I could see the whites all around his irises. Sarah, he called out, his voice cracking. Dave, get me out. Sarah screamed, pounding on the door again. She's crazy, she locked us in, break the door down. Dave looked back at me, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax statue. The realization hit him in waves, first confusion, then denial, then a crushing, suffocating horror. Us, he whispered. Who is us? I didn't need to answer. Mark, Sarah yelled from upstairs. Tell him to open the door. Dave dropped the gardening trowel. It clattered loudly on the hardwood floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He looked at me with eyes that were suddenly wet and red. How long? He asked. Does it matter? I replied. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold and trembling. I pressed the heavy brass key into his palm and closed his fingers around it. They're all yours, Dave, I said. Elena, wait, he stammered, looking at the key like it was a live grenade. I don't know what to do. You open the door, I said, stepping past him toward the open sunlight. Or you don't, it's your choice now. Where are you going? He asked, panic rising in his voice. He didn't want to be alone with this. He didn't want to face the monster behind the door by himself. I'm leaving, I said. I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and impending rain. I walked down the steps, the gravel of the driveway crunching under my heels. Behind me, I heard Dave's heavy footsteps running up the stairs. I heard him call out Sarah's name, a sound filled with heartbreak and fury. I reached my car, my old sedan, not the Porsche I had just sold, and threw the bag of money into the passenger seat. As I put my hand on the door handle, I heard the sound I had been waiting for. The heavy, metallic clack of the bathroom lock turning. Then the door swinging open. Then silence. A split second of absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. And then the explosion. I didn't hear words, just a roar of male rage that shook the windows of the house I used to call home. I got into the car and slammed the door, sealing myself inside my own little bubble of safety. I started the engine. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the upstairs window where the iron bars were still bolted into the brick. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb just as a police cruiser turned the corner at the end of the street, its lights flashing silently in the afternoon sun. They were heading to my house. Linda next door had come through after all. I waved at the officer as I passed him. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the open front door where Dave's shouts were now spilling out into the neighborhood. I turned the radio on. I turned it up loud. I had $50,000, a tank of gas, and absolutely nowhere to be. For the first time in 7 years, I was completely alone, and it felt wonderful. I'm Alina, 29 years old, and I just destroyed my cheating husband's life with a single click while he was trapped in our master bathroom with the neighbor's wife. The laptop screen went black, reflecting my own distorted silhouette in the glass. I felt a vibration in my chest that wasn't my phone. It was the hum of absolute, terrifying freedom. Upstairs, the frantic screaming had died down to a rhythmic, exhausted thudding against the reinforced oak door. They were realizing that no one was coming, but I had a schedule to keep. I turned away from the digital wreckage of Mark's career and walked briskly to the guest room on the main floor. I had staged my exit strategy weeks ago, but there were final touches to secure. I grabbed the Louis Vuitton suitcase I had hidden in the back of the closet. It wasn't packed with clothes. I could buy new clothes. I opened the jewelry box I had swiped from the master bedroom earlier that morning. I shoveled the contents into the suitcase's side pocket. The Cartier bracelet he bought when he made partner. The diamond studs from the anniversary he almost forgot. The vintage pearl necklace his mother gave me, which she always said was too good for a girl like me. They clattered together, a symphony of expensive reparations. I zipped the bag shut. It was heavy, but the weight felt grounding, like an anchor keeping me from floating away on the adrenaline. I dragged the suitcase to the kitchen and parked it by the back door. I wasn't done yet. I walked back to the massive marble island, the centerpiece of the kitchen I had designed and Mark had paid for. I opened the junk drawer, bypassing the takeout menus and spare batteries, and pulled out the thick manila envelope. The divorce papers. I had signed them 3 months ago, the day I found the second burner phone in his gym bag. I slapped the envelope down on the cold marble. It landed with a satisfying thwack. I reached into the liquor cabinet and pulled out his prized bottle of Glenlivet 25. I set it right next to the papers. He was going to need a stiff drink when he finally got out of that bathroom, if he had a job left to pay for the next bottle. I looked at the tableau I had created, the legal end of our marriage sitting next to his favorite vice, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Now for the final severance. I looked at the heavy brass skeleton key sitting on the counter. It was the only way out of the master bathroom. I picked it up. The metal was warm from sitting in the sun. I could leave it here. I could throw it in the bushes. But that would be too easy on them. Mark and Sarah didn't deserve a mystery. They deserved a reckoning. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to neighbors. I tapped Dave. Dave was Sarah's husband, a high school history teacher who thought his wife was at a spin class. He was a good man, the kind who lent us his pressure washer and never asked for it back. The phone rang. Once, twice. Alina. Dave's voice was cheerful, oblivious. "Everything okay?" "Dave," I said, my voice steady, sharp as cut glass. "You need to come over. Now." "Right now," I said. "The front door is unlocked. Just walk in." "Is Sarah there?" he asked, a sudden frequency of worry entering his tone. "She's not answering her texts." I felt a pang of pity, sharp and quick, but I shoved it down. "Just come over, Dave." I hung up. I walked to the foyer, my heels clicking on the hardwood for the last time. The thudding upstairs had stopped. They must have heard my voice. "Alina." Mark's voice drifted down, hoarse, desperate, pathetic. "Who was that?" "Did you call the cops?" "Alina, open the damn door." I didn't answer. I stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, smoothing the fabric of my dress. I waited. The front door creaked open. Dave stepped inside, blinking against the adjustment from the bright outdoors. He was wearing a World's Best Dad t-shirt and holding a gardening trowel. He looked around the empty living room, his eyes landing on me, then darting to the staircase. "Alina," he breathed. "What's going on? Where is she?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He was the innocent bystander I was about to weaponize. "I have something of yours," I said softly. Dave frowned, confused. "What?" I held up the brass key. It glinted in the foyer light. "This is the key to my master bathroom," I said. "Why? Why do you have it?" "Because I locked the door," I replied. "Why would you lock the door?" "To keep the rats inside." From upstairs, Sarah heard his voice. "Dave," she shrieked. The sound was raw, terrified, unrecognizable. Dave flinched physically, dropping the trowel. It clattered loudly on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the tense house. "Sarah," he called out, looking up the stairs, his face draining of color. "Dave, get me out." Sarah screamed, pounding on the door again. "She's crazy, she locked us in, break the door down." Dave looked back at me, horror dawning on him in slow, crushing waves. "Us," he whispered. "Who is us?" "Mark," Sarah yelled. "Tell him to open the door." The realization hit Dave like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled for a second. He looked at me with wet, red eyes. "How long?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I replied. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold and trembling violently. I pressed the heavy brass key into his palm and closed his fingers around it. "They're all yours, Dave," I said. "Alina, wait," he stammered, staring at the key like it was a live grenade. I don't know what to do." "You open the door," I said, stepping past him toward the open sunlight. "Or you don't, it's your choice now." I walked out the front door. The air hit me fresh, smelling of cut grass and ozone. I walked to my car, my movements mechanical. I threw the suitcase into the passenger seat. Behind me I heard Dave's heavy footsteps running up the stairs. I heard him call out Sarah's name, a sound filled with heartbreak and a rising, volcanic fury. I got into the driver's seat. I didn't look back at the Victorian masterpiece. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene of a dead marriage, and I had just handed the murder weapon to the executioner. I started the engine. As I shifted into drive, I heard the heavy, metallic clack of the bathroom lock turning upstairs, then the door swinging open, then silence. A split second of vacuum-sealed silence. And then the explosion. I didn't hear words, just a roar of male rage that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. I slammed my foot on the gas. I sped away, leaving the papers, the scotch, the money, and the ruin in my rearview mirror. I was alone. I was empty. And I had never felt more alive. I'm Alina Vance, 29 years old, and I am finally free because the revenge wasn't just about locking the door. It was about opening a new one for myself. I drove until the fuel light screamed at me from the dashboard. I didn't stop at the first gas station. I didn't stop at the second. I drove until my hands were cramping around the leather steering wheel, permanently clawed into a grip of white-knuckled survival. When I finally pulled over at a truck stop 3 states away, I didn't cry. I vomited into a trash can next to the diesel pumps. It was a physical purge, my body rejecting the toxicity of the last 7 years in one violent heave. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I bought a bottle of water and a prepaid phone. I tossed my old iPhone into a dumpster behind a Waffle House in Tennessee. That was 6 months ago. Now I am sitting on a wrought iron balcony in a city where nobody knows my name. The air here smells like salt and roasted coffee, not deception and expensive cologne. I lean back in my chair and rest my feet on the railing. Below me, the city moves in a chaotic, beautiful rhythm that has absolutely nothing to do with me. I take a sip of Pinot Grigio. It tastes crisp. It tastes like mine. I look at my reflection in the sliding glass door. For a decade, I woke up every morning and painted a mask onto my face. I used heavy concealer to hide the dark circles from nights spent wondering where Mark really was. I used foundation to cover the stress breakouts that mapped my jawline like a constellation of anxiety. Today, I am wearing nothing but moisturizer. My skin is clear. It's actually glowing. It turns out that cortisol was the only toxin I needed to eliminate. I check the banking app on my new phone. The number is still shocking to look at. The house sold 2 weeks ago. It went for below market value because nobody wanted the scandal house, where the police had been called 3 times in 1 week, but I didn't care. Mark signed the papers without a fight. He had to. His severance package from the firm, yes, they fired him the moment the story hit the local gossip blogs, wasn't enough to cover his legal fees for the divorce, or the lawsuit Dave filed against him for alienation of affection. I smile, a genuine, private curling of my lips. Dave didn't kill him. He did something worse. He sued him for every penny he had, and then he took Sarah to a marriage counselor before ultimately deciding he deserved better. Dave is doing okay. I sent him a postcard last week. No return address. Just a picture of a sunset and 2 words, "Thank you." I look back at the horizon. The sun is dipping below the skyline, painting the clouds in bruised purples and fiery oranges. This apartment isn't a Victorian masterpiece. It's a 2-bedroom condo with exposed brick and noisy pipes, but I bought it with cash. I bought the furniture with cash. I bought my peace of mind with the wreckage of my old life. I remember the weight of that brass key in my hand. I remember the moment I decided to hand it to Dave. Everyone told me I was cold. My mother told me I was vindictive. Mark's lawyer called me calculating. They were all right. I was cold because I had been frozen out of my own marriage for years. I was vindictive because forgiveness is a luxury I couldn't afford. I was calculating because the math of our relationship never added up until I subtracted him. A breeze kicks up, tossing my hair across my face. I brush it back. I don't flinch at the sudden movement. I don't worry if my hair is perfect for when my husband gets home. There is no husband coming home. There is just me. I stand up and walk to the edge of the balcony. I look down at the streetlights flickering on one by one, illuminating the path forward. I used to think my life ended in that bathroom hallway. I thought the explosion of their affair was the bomb that would kill me. But it wasn't a bomb. It was a firework. It burned everything down so I could see the sky again. I finish the wine in one swallow. I turn my back on the view and walk into my quiet, empty, beautiful living room. I lock the balcony door behind me, not to keep anyone in, but to keep the bad things out. I am Alina Vance. I am alone. And for the first time in my entire life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be.